Hi, and you're very welcome back to the Leitrim GAA Podcast here on finalwhistle.ie with myself, Breifne Early. It's been a little bit of a hiatus since our last show. It's been very, very busy here in Final Whistle Towers, but we're delighted to say we're back, and we're back for the season ahead of what promises to be a very, very exciting club season of football and hurling and ladies football over the next few months here in County Leitrim. Of course, we have the small matter of a Connacht Semi Final this weekend against Galway to talk about as well. And we'll be chatting to the manager of the Leitrim team, Andy Moran, about how his league campaign has gone, that victory in London, despite looking a bit shaky towards the end, and how he's faring out for his side's approach to the game in Pearse Stadium on Sunday afternoon. But first, I'm going to be joined by Aidan Rooney, of course, a survivor of that 1994 championship winning team, and also had the experience of playing against Galway in Leitrim's last appearance in a Connacht final back in 2020. Aidan joins me now. Aidan, I probably shouldn't use the word survivor to talk about you. You're very much alive and kicking, but welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Breifne. Great to be back.
Yeah, I'll try and choose my terminology a little bit more carefully as we get through the next 50 minutes or so of the show. But yes, it is that kind of a big championship Sunday. It's maybe missing a little bit of the excitement from just anecdotally walking around. There doesn't seem to be as big a buzz ahead of this game as there would have been maybe 10 or 15, 20 years ago when Leitrim made the trip to Pearse Stadium. We've pre-recorded the interview with Andy. I know he pulls me up on it in the interview in terms of using the word daunting, but I'm going to maybe ask you about that. Is this a daunting task for Leitrim on Sunday, or is it something that really we can go into with a lot of hope and expectation? What's your thoughts on it so far?
Daunting, Breifne, is probably an understatement where we are at the moment. Like we have a substantial gap to bridge. Now, you can look at the game on Sunday in several ways. You know, how is Andy and the group preparing for the game? In contrast, I listened to Tony McEntee down here this week talking about, the Tailteann Cup and how important it was now all of a sudden, and getting ready for the Tailteann Cup. Whether he was before the Roscommon game last weekend, I don't know. What Andy and the boys' mindset is going to be going into this game, obviously you have to go with your best foot forward. You have to go and try. And the problem with these games, I think, at this stage, for the likes of Leitrim, is that you're probably so far away in some ways from Galway, and you find it difficult to learn a lot because you really have to go with a defensive strategy to try and minimise Galway's effect on you. And as a result, it's very difficult to come out and play the way you might want to play, in a different circumstance. So you're kind of playing horses for courses. Galway were exceptionally good in McHale Park. They're in Division 1. Porry Joyce has got the bounce that he probably looked for the year before, didn't get. He's got the bounce now. Galway won't be coming down to Pearse Stadium on Sunday with any other intention only of putting as much on Leitrim as they possibly can. There are times in the past maybe when Mayo weren't able to do that, but Galway are very clinical. It'll be a very, very difficult day at the office for Leitrim. So you're trying to quantify the balance, and I appreciate Andy. Absolutely, he has to come out with his best foot forward and go positively at the game. Of course he has, but he has to have in the back of his mind too as to how he can best use the game for Leitrim's development into the Tailteann Cup, because the reality for Leitrim and for some of the counties in Division 4 in particular, and in Division 3 as well, like winning the Tailteann Cup is probably the target for the season after the promotion in the leagues. That's probably the order of importance. To compete with Galway is a bridge too far. There's no question. No matter how loyal we are, to our county, which we still have to be pragmatic. The bridge is too far here. Can Leitrim stay in the game for 40 minutes? If they could, it'd be fantastic, because it'd mean that you'd be getting huge value out of the game for that length of time. If Leitrim are out of the game before half time, if Galway hit them with sucker punches, then the game becomes less valuable, because then it becomes a damn squid, and the players are not getting full value out of it.
Let's rewind a little bit, first of all, and look at the season so far and the progress, because I think anyone who's looking in from any kind of level can look at the progress that's been made in the last 6 months under Andy and with this new batch of players. And even though there's a lot of familiar faces, there seems to be a kind of a new lease of life within the squad and within some of the performances. What's been your take on the first half of the year in terms of that league campaign and that victory in London? Even though, as I mentioned in the intro, we did make a little bit of hard work of it in the end. What's been your assessment of the whole situation?
Well, I suppose if you've been very, very clinical about it, our target for the year surely had to be promotion from Division 4. That had to be the ultimate target. We knew the championship draw, promotion from Division 4, and the game in London was a good victory. Anytime you win in London, it's a good victory. Like, let's be under no illusions, particularly in the modern era where London are really, really up and at it. Even 30 years ago, we struggled to win on the road in London when we were going well. So London's a difficult place to go for any team. Anyone that travels is going to come up against that, formidable kind of London scenario where you're going over to a carnival atmosphere and all that kind of stuff. But no, a good result to get and that was important. But the more important London game was lost. That was the one in the league. Like, if that game was won, we were heading to the Marfix Park, where we played quite poorly. But we were going to Marfix Park to get promoted, and that was a completely different scenario than where we ended up going to Marfix Park and playing a game that didn't mean anything. From the point of view of promotion and points difference. So I would argue a little bit that we were doing okay. We have a freshness about the team. Certainly, there are players that have really stepped up in this league that hadn't stepped up as much in the previous couple of seasons. The likes of Pearse Dolan would come to mind, for example. Donald Rinn has found a new lease of life. There are loads of players around the pitch. Darragh Rooney is back, flying. Ryan O'Rourke. Mark Plunkett has stepped up. Lots of guys have stepped up to the plate as regards they're better than where they were before this. So now the next step is, how do we get this move forward again? And that's the challenge that Andy has now heading into the game in Pearse Stadium. We are where we are. We've got a London victory. Unfortunately, we didn't get promotion. Promotion would have been superb and probably a great platform to grow. People say you get what you deserve in the league. You probably do. Are we ready for Division 3 yet? I think we are, to be fair. You see with the fluctuation up and down. You see where Cavan have gone to, and us very competitive with Cavan in the first game. So I would say the quicker we get into Division 3, the better for our progression. Like Terry got us in there. Can Andy get and the boys get us in there? I think they can. Can they get us in there that we stay in there and we fight and learn and stay on that pathway for a while? I think absolutely. Excuse me, I've let you know, Breifne, it's a good sign. But if we can stay in there, Breifne, we then become competitive as time moves on with Galway. This is not a quick fix. It's not a case of going in and Andy gives us a great buoyancy, and I know that's the case. And all of a sudden we're competitive with Galway and Mayo. We're not. Like, we have to be. It's a long pathway, and how long the pathway is very hard to determine. Is it 2 seasons? Is it 3 seasons? It's a lot of work to get back up to the level where we can be competitive in a Connacht Championship game. I listened to some very similar comments in the Marfix Park last week with Sligo playing Roscommon. The result was inevitable from the start. Although Sligo were competitive for, the first half, the result was never in doubt. It was always, there was no sign of it been anything different. I think Pearse Stadium would be very similar on Sunday, and hopefully, if we're within 4 points of Galway on Sunday in Pearse Stadium, I'd be delighted, because it means we come out in the second half competitive and going at it again. You've
kind of preempted my next question, which will be, what would you deem, or what would be deemed a success in terms of that game? Because if you're saying that winning it is a no-go, like, on our best day and Galway's worst day, can we cause a surprise on Sunday?
No, I don't think so. But I think we can. I think we can if we can get into Galway, like we do with Mayo on the last venture in Carrick and Shannon. If we can get into them and try and force the game as much as we possibly can. Like, ultimately, Breifne, I would say we're trying to learn as much as we can from these games. We're not, like, if we go out and put up 12 men behind the ball and we defend resolutely and try and stop goals and all that kind of stuff, that's fine. That might get us across a bit of a bridge and a bit of something, But, are we going to learn much? We're not going to learn much about our forward line, that's for sure. We're going to learn. We have guys who can tackle and we can defend and we can do all that stuff and the modern game type of stuff. But can we develop ourselves a bit more? I'm looking at that the game point of view. Can we go toe to toe with Galway? obviously it's a massive challenge with the standard of player they have. You look at the Shane Walshes and, the guys up front, Comer, Rob Finnerty, O'Lee, Heaney, like Daly, these guys are flying. They're top of the game and promoted back to Division 1. Like, they're really on top of their game. When we were playing Galway in the 90s, we were in the same division. Like, we were Division 2 or maybe a division ahead of them. We were in Division 2 at the time. So the scenarios aren't the same at the moment. So to put it in context, to be in touch at half time, I mean, genuinely in touch, Galway haven't had to look at us and kind of go, how do we beat this or figure it out? Again, I didn't see that last Sunday in Marfrix Park, and I don't expect to see it this Sunday in Pearse Stadium, because I don't think we're at that level yet where we can put Galway in a difficult position. It'll be great. Keith Byrne is obviously back. He's going to give us a huge lift, from the point of view of our potency up front. If we could turn the screw on them early in the game and try and get something on the board to make them think about us, a couple of points, but even a goal, try and upset the balance a little bit. That's what we're looking to do. Is that possible? Yeah, absolutely, it's possible. It's a game of football. At the end of the day, we're not going over. But the reality here is that we're going to have a momentous task ahead of us to try and be competitive for long enough to get some value out of the game. That'll be the way I see it. If we get within 10 points, is that a success? It's not really a success because we've lost by 10 points. But is that a reality? Possibly is. Again, we go on hope rather than expectation, Breifne, this time. But the progression here for us we have to be looking at it in a long-term plan type progression, 3 to 5 year plan with this crop of players who are fresh. They are young. They are in their prime. A lot of these guys are 23, 24, 25 years of age. They're at the right age for a longevity plan where, you can go in and you can go after this thing for several years and try and bring the level up. I think Leitrim are in a good place that way. I think there's a good age profile across the team. I know Emlyn will be laughing at me when he hears this, but the profile across the team generally is pretty good. It's pretty good. Like, they're all in their mid-20s and they're all. So I think, the Andy interjection this time is good. Has Andy got 3 to 5 years in him to give the Leitrim football? Hopefully he has, and the jury's out on whether we can make progress again. Like, progress next year has to be promotion from Division 4, and it has to be a stronger footing in the Connacht Championship. If we go out and beat Galway on Sunday, I'll eat my hat and gladly without sauce. But
live on the show next week.
Live on telly next week. But it's a bridge too far. But we have to be pragmatic, optimistic but pragmatic, and we have to look at it and can we get ourselves into a really competitive. And I suppose that's the question really for the boys this week in the management team is, this is me talking in a pragmatic way. You don't really want the players talking pragmatically. You want the players ultimately believing that they can go out and win this game, or at least be competitive in the game. And we have to approach it that way, where we're going to go out and take Galway on. And I'd rather go out and take Galway on and lose by 20 than go out and try and contain Galway and set up in a really defensive, negative way and lose by 10. To me, there's more learning for us in the one-to-one battles. Can we have somebody that can stick with Shane Walsh? Can we have somebody to stick with Comer? Can we take these fellas on and find out exactly where we are? Because there's a kind of a falseness, I think, in the modern day game where you don't really know where you are. Like, when you set up defensively with lots of players back, you don't know who's marking tightly. You don't know who's capable of marking tightly. You're not really learning that, in my opinion. You're just closing off as many of the gates as you can to try and stop a flood coming down. I'd love to see coming out of Galway on Sunday, maybe coming out, maybe naming 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 players that say, wow, that guy actually competed really well, and we have something there going forward. And that's, I think, where we need to be going, because individually, it's still an individual game end of the day. You can bring in all the tactics you want into the game, defensive strategies all you want, but ultimately it's still the man-to-man stuff that wins games. Am I better than my opponent? Can I outplay my opponent? That's the way I look at the game if I was approaching it. And I think Leitrim people would respect that. If we went at it toe-to-toe, the supporters would be happy.
In terms of that game in London, you mentioned that Keith Byrne is now available after his suspension from that game in Marfrix Park. In terms of the confidence that will be taken by the team collectively, having got through that London challenge without his services, it's kind of looked like a one-man band for the year when you're outside the group looking in. But for anyone who's been to games, it's been very much a team performance in every single good performance we've had this season. How much confidence can the team really build from having got through that challenge without the talisman up front and others like Ryan O'Rourke stepping up into the player that we've expected to become?
Well, a guy who we probably would have ridiculed over the last number of years in certain ways would be Donal Rinn. Like, for example's sake, like we would have, talked about Donal's fitness level.
He's bigger than me. I never ridiculed him. You can, I'll leave that one with you.
And his work rate and so on and so forth. But to be fair to Donal Rinn, like, he's turned the corner this year and he scored 1-3 in London from midfield. Pearse Dolan came in with 3 points from midfield. We scored 1-6 out of the middle of the field in London. That's a huge testament to where we're trying to go. When you're getting midfielders that are pushing that up hard up the field, getting on the end of scores and creating scoring chances, like Ryan O'Rourke with his 2-2 and Darragh Rooney with 2 points. Like, we do have potency up front. There's no question about that. Like, we have seen our forward line over the last couple of years developing into a pretty potent unit as regards what we can do. Obviously these guys are pivotal to us going forward. Mark Plunkett, Mark's work rate and Mark's power and Mark's power running, these things are all kind of set now in the right place, to at least move forward. Back in the day, I remember Peter Carr roaring at us in Ballinamore in the early 90s that we were now fit enough to get fit. It didn't impress us really when you're on your hands and knees above in St. Phelim's in Ballinamore trying to find your next breath. But the reality was that's kind of where we are now. We're fit enough to get fit and go after the next part of this plan. I know some of the panel are probably at a stage in their careers when they're looking at it kind of going, do I have any more to give? But I think the majority of the panel is at an age where they're fresh and they're ready, hopefully they're ready to go on and keep going. Like, I don't look at this as a one game scenario, Galway and Sunday. Galway will be whatever it is. Like, if we go down to Galway and we perform well and get the best out of ourselves, that's the most we can hope for. Where that brings us as regards to results, I don't think it'll bring us a result, but if it brings us a performance and something that we can look back and look forward with, looking back on it and say, yeah, we did well in this position, that position, we fought well in these positions. Like, if I was Donal Rinn and Pearse Dolan on Sunday, wouldn't you love to go in against Conroy and Tierney and come out saying, yeah, like, we did well here, we did well. Look at the man-to-man battles, like, can John Daly, Mark Plunkett, is Pearse going to go in on Sean Kelly, or is, Keith Byrne going to go in on Sean Kelly, at full back, and can we match up to these guys? And I think we can. I think individually, talent-wise, there's no player in that squad would say that he's below a Galway player, but ultimately as a group and, the collective, I suppose, fitness levels and the collective, drive of a Division 1 team versus a Division 4 team, that's the gap we're talking about. So I'm not convinced the gap's as big as people think nowadays, but, the players have to believe that too. And I suppose you'd be hoping that we can go after it as a group and that we haven't thrown the towel in mentally as a group, that we're kind of going out, trying to get the best out of ourselves and learn going forward, because really it's a learning curve. And the faster we can get up it, the better for us.
Yeah, and quickly before we finish wrap up this part of the show, but if things go as you predict on Sunday and we come out of Pearse Stadium with a defeat, it's the Charlton Cup for us for the rest of the summer in terms of our county scene. Can we give that a good crack? Is there a semi-final or a final opportunity there for us? There's some big name teams in there, the likes of Down, Cavan. As you mentioned, we've managed to, on a one-off basis, individual games over the last year or two, we've put it up to both those sides, Derry in there as well, possibly. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we absolutely can. Like, we'd be hoping against hope that Cavan can take Donegal out on Sunday and we get rid of Cavan out of the Tailteann Cup. But I think absolutely semi-final of the Tailteann Cup is a realistic target. To get in there, like down, excuse the pun, or on a downward spiral. You know what I mean? We're looking at teams that, we've competed well this year with Cavan, who have gone on and I suppose cantered out of the group really. We've gone to Tipperary and we won. We went down there and we showed a real clean pair of heels, and like we know we can compete with these teams, So I think absolutely the Tailteann Cup is there for a reason, Breifne, and I think, it's taken a little bit of a knock going to the Saturday of an Ireland final weekend, I suppose, regards its position. The GAA need to be very careful how they sell this competition. I think Fergal and the guys in Croke Park are very aware of how this has to be sold. We can't let this fail. This Tailteann Cup failed, the RMB failed, Tommy Murphy failed. These have all failed as examples of what we're trying to do to give everybody competitive championship football through the summer, or at least for half the summer nowadays. But I think the Tailteann Cup has to succeed. there has to be a massive push from the GAA to make sure it succeeds, because if it doesn't succeed, we're going to fall back into this noose again. It does make the leagues more competitive. It does give them that edge where promotion does get you a reward other than promoted in the league. So I think, yeah, we can, to answer your question, we can be competitive. Of course we can. A semi-final berth, absolutely. Of course it's a reality. Like, you're looking at 3 rounds. It's the same as any championship in your club scenario. You're not looking at, and you're looking at games that you can win. And like, great to get a team in Division 3. Great for your focus. Great for, you're missing the teams you've played all year. Play one of the teams a division above you and see, can you compete? Sure, like, we're looking at teams, Breifne. There's teams in Division 2 we would seriously consider we could compete with. So like, there are bridges, but we have to target the best one we can get across as quickly as possible. Yeah, I think absolutely Leitrim should be looking at least a semi-final of a Tailteann Cup is a reality. But again, I know we're moving on to the next part of the show and we talk about club football. It depends where the mindsets are with this. What's the mindset out of Salt Hill on Sunday if things don't go according to plan? If we don't win in Salt Hill Sunday, is there a kind of a down tools mentality within the group as regards, let's get back to the clubs, let's get back to the club championship? That's really the grey area where you don't know how counties are setting up within their own groups. What are they targeting as their kind of targets for the championship? Is it a realistic target of, let's give the championship a crack and then let's deal with the Tailteann Cup when it comes? But I don't know how that's been approached in Sligo, and certainly I don't know in Leitrim how it's been approached as regards what the players and the management are actually targeting as the realistic targets for the season. So that's all to play with. But I think, answer your question, Tailteann Cup, of course it has to be a target for the Saturday before the All-Ireland final. It is a great advent, and it is a great, imagine going up there to play Cavan in a Tailteann Cup final in Croke Park. Wouldn't that be ideal? We were there a couple of years ago.
I take it now if you're offering it to me. It'd be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Aidan, we'll talk about the club scene, as you mentioned, in a couple of minutes. But first, let's hear from the man of the hour. Andy Moran, of course, sat down with me late last week to have a conversation about his thoughts on the 6 months in the job so far and how he thinks ahead of the clash in Salt Hill on Sunday. Andy Moran, Leitrim manager. It's been a while since we spoke to you, but it's been an eventful couple of months through the National League. We can talk, I suppose, a little bit over the next 10 or 12 minutes or so about maybe conceding home advantage to London, the defeat to Sligo, some of the big wins we had, some of the really good wins down in Waterford and Tipperary in particular come to mind in terms of some of the performances. But I suppose the first question I have for you tonight is how are you finding it? How have the last, 5 or 6 months as Leitrim manager been?
Yeah, we love it. I can say that without hesitation, to be honest with you. It's been brilliant. We've carried a panel of 39 there throughout the course of the league and reduced to 36 there over the last couple of weeks. And it's just been the response. I think both myself and Brendan have got with the under-20s, myself and the lads with the seniors has been amazing. And to see the centre of excellence in Anaduff there with the guts of 60 players out training over the course of the winter. I think it's been a huge success for Leitrim GAA, a huge success for ourselves as a management team. But I think in general, from what we came into what we've been told has been happening over the last couple of years in terms of players' participation and stuff like that. I think the first goal of 2022 was to get players enjoying their football, get people playing and getting people to want to wear the jersey of Leitrim. And I think both on the under-20 side and the senior side, we've succeeded in that.
Let's start with the positives. I mentioned 2 of the games. Obviously, there were, I think, 4 victories during that league campaign. Some that we might not normally be expected to get results from far field, particularly as one difficult location to get it 2 points home in the bag from. From yourself, what's been the highlights for you? Obviously, the London result as well. We kind of made it hard for ourselves, but in Leitrim, we like doing that. But at the same time, there's been some really good successes. What for you has been the highlight of the last couple of months on the field?
The amount of players that have got playing, Breifne. You look through it, with Darren Maxwell, made his championship debut last week. But even going away from that, you have the likes of Jack Hesslin, who haven't played since 19. Donald Casey didn't play last year. And guys like that, the Cullens back playing for Leitrim. I think it's just been huge in terms of just the amount of players that have played. the amount of players that want to play. Of course, when you haven't played inter-county football since 2019, it takes a long period of time to get that body of work together to get to the level that you need to get to. And there's a couple of guys there that need a bit of work, and you'll see the best of them in 2023. But the amount of work these guys have done since from whenever we started training, it has just been enormous. And I think it's paying off now. I think you can see the moments of brilliance. Even the likes of Mulligan coming back in, who hasn't played for the last 2 seasons, back into the squad, and what he added to the squad last week when he came on against London. What Jack Heslin can do when he's at that pomp, when he's really playing well. The likes of Donny Flynn, the way he's played over the last couple of games. Ryan O'Rourke hadn't played for the last year or two for Leitrim as well. It took him a while to get going, but now look what he's doing. Scored his first goals in Championship football last week. So there's so many benefits. There's so many success stories over the course of the league. I think it's been unreal. And even when you see the competition that's going on for the goalkeeping position between Benny and Darren, we've competition right throughout the pitch, and I think that's just amazing.
You mentioned that particular position, and I suppose that coming out of the London game, there was a mistake in the London game. Then they changed the following week. Was that down to just seeing what Darren could offer, or what was the thinking when he actually made that decision?
No, I think the two keepers played 3.5 games each throughout the course of the 7 games in the National League. It was simple as that.
Fair enough, very diplomatic. Can't really argue with that.
I think the two guys did very well. I think Darren was probably nearly man of the match in the county final last year, bar the excellence of Keith. I think Darren was probably man of the match outside Keith. I think he pulled off a great save to his left-hand side. Benny's been a great keeper for Leitrim over the course of many years. I think the two of them played 3.5 games, and it was a really, really tough decision for us last week against London, and we went with Darren. We could have easily went with Benny, and I think the two of them kind of done really well. Yes, of course, keepers, like I come from Mayo. There's been many talks about keepers throughout the years in Mayo, and a forward makes a mistake high up the field and it ends up in a goal down the other side of the field, and no one mentions the forward. The keeper makes a mistake and ends up in a goal. People mention the keepers. Keepers are going to make mistakes, and Darren didn't have a flawless game last week. Did very well, and I don't think any keepers had a flawless game throughout the course of a season. And I think the two of them were growing really well. The competition was really good with each other. Young Flood done really well in the 20s game. They're 3 weeks ago against Mayo. I think it's a position where Leitrim can grow in the next couple of years, and I think Benny has led the line really well, and I think the boys are doing really well. And when there's competition, I think that's when people play really, really well, and that's what we need to keep happening throughout the course of the squad.
You've kind of preempted my next question, because I was going to ask you about how important it is to have that competition for every single position on the pitch, because obviously positions are a lot more liquid than they might have been maybe 15, 20 years ago. So a cornerback doesn't necessarily stay a cornerback for 70 minutes, but to have that kind of the range of abilities and the range of talent right down, not just 1 to 15, but 1 to 26, 1 to 27, 1 to 36 in the squad.
I think it's important. I think when you're in your first year as well, you have to. I think we made 4 changes, maybe 4 or 5 changes every league game right throughout the course of the league. And the reason for that is that there's no point us just seeing 17 players, 18 players throughout the course of the league. I think we had to see a wide variety of players, and we did that. Right from the old guard like Shane Moran and Shane Quinn, and these guys who have been here for many years. Of course, Paddy Maguire's, Conor Reynolds. Right throughout the reintroduced fellas, the likes of Conor Cullen that took a bit longer to get fit, but played the last few league games. Right throughout them guys, it was very important that we seen a range of players, and that creates competition. Of course, it leaves some fellas disappointed because they really want to play a run of games. As a player myself, like, you want to play the 7 league games, but when a manager is in and a management team are in for the first year, and especially guys coming from the outside of Leitrim that don't know the history of the players, I wouldn't know the players as well as other people in Leitrim. We had to see players in pressure situations, and we did. And like, you look at the way Conor Farrell did when he came in really well. You look at the way Kieran Cullen did when he came in really well. And you look at all these guys did really good jobs throughout the course of the league. And it gives us something to really think about going into the London game, and then now going into the Galway game, which is a completely different game.
Yeah, you mentioned the impact Emlyn made in London last week at the end. I know he was involved in the early build-up for that goal that Ryan got in injury time, which took the pressure off game. The game was won at that stage once we held on to possession, but to get that goal and wrap it up and just put it to bed was a nice move. Emlyn involved, but also that dart and run from a man named at full back to start the game, Donald Casey. He made 2 or 3 of those in the last few moments of the game. With Ryan, little interchanges like that. How important is it to players like that? David Boone has done similar as well. And we see players dropping back and having that impact from wing back when they've been named the full forward, like Ryan O'Rourke in earlier rounds of the league. How important is it to have that kind of fluidity within the squad and players who can play pretty much up and down the field wherever you put them?
Yeah, I think we give ourselves a hard time in Leitrim at times that we don't do this, we don't do that. But some of the players that have been produced that are in this team now, are of the highest order. I think the clubs like Fianna, the clubs like Leitrim Gales, and all these clubs, Mohill, Ballinamore, should take huge pride in the footballers that they've produced. It's now our job to make them into county footballers and consistent county footballers over the course of 1 to 2 to 3 years. That's what we're trying to do. But Casey is an exceptional player. Ryan O'Rourke is an exceptional player, and there's many more throughout the course of the Leitrim team. And Emlyn, being the oldest person on the team, has been the highest scorer for us for how many years. It was funny to see them 3 guys within it. So it's yes, there's always a handing over of the guard, but these young guys coming through have really, really strong kind of a base of talent, and it's up to us now to kind of push them on to the next phase of their career over the next 3 years.
There's so many other little things I want to talk to you about while I have you, just before we get on to the remainder of the championship campaign. Stuff like the decision to play the Tipperary game the night before the Sligo fixture. It just created that imbalance in terms of competitive fairness and our own promotion hopes. Any thoughts on that, even looking back at it now? Right decision, wrong decision, or do you even want to comment on it?
It was a horrible decision, if I'm being honest with you. But I think the famous statement is you only can control what's in front of you. In a way, were Tipperary always going to win that game? They probably were. Like, you're on about promotion. When we talked earlier on, Cavan and Tip were the favourites to get promoted. And in fairness to Tipperary, they drew with Waterford, lost to ourselves, and they won 5 games on the bounce. So that's promotion form. And what it did give us, we took the benefit out of it. Myself and Mike Zolan were lucky enough then to be able to get to Thurles, watch the game against London, and we got to see London in the flesh. So Tipperary were probably always going to win that game, even if it was on the Sunday. We were very put out by it at the time, I have to be honest. We thought, how has this been allowed to happen? But on the plus side, we got to Tipperary, we've seen the game, we're in Clonus, we've seen London up front, live in front of us. You've seen what they were doing, what they were trying to do, and it probably helped us going into the championship. So, listen, I didn't think it was the right decision at the time, but in hindsight, it probably helped us a tiny bit.
Let's talk about the London game. Great trip. It always kind of really creates huge excitement in the county, almost in camp in Cricklewood for the weekend for most people. How much of that are the team and yourself aware of? Obviously, not being from Leitrim, you wouldn't necessarily know the traditions that Leitrim supporters would have going over. Do the team get involved in that, or are they very much in their own little bubble, just focusing on the game, and then after the game, cut loose for a couple hours?
Yeah, so our hotel selection, firstly, Breifne is planned because we couldn't be, I don't think, in Mourns or Cricklewood the night before the game, So, of course, you're aware of it. You are planning it, the McGovern Park, all that. And we used it, I have to say, we used it. We were kind of stating that this was a home game for us. Even though we're in London, like the majority of the fans there were from Leitrim. Like the atmosphere going down the stretch, like when we went to 8 points up, the atmosphere was unbelievable. You could feel the Leitrim fans. It probably got to us a tiny bit. I'm not saying we joked or anything like that. We probably played too exuberant then, and we just let the shackles off. And then all of a sudden, we lost our way a tiny bit, and London started coming back. But then when Ryan and Casey Brake and Emlyn and James Rooney hit that crossfield ball, you could feel the Leitrim fans getting behind us again. So we definitely did use the atmosphere. The Leitrim people have been over in London, and we took it as a home game. That's the way we phrased the game to the boys, and you could feel that right throughout the game.
in terms of the actual game, and particularly those last 10 or 12 minutes when, as you mentioned, we went from 8 points down to just being that single point up, with them having chances to score that they failed to take. What was going through your own head in those last maybe 4 or 5 minutes, the last three, and the couple of minutes of injury time before the Ryan O'Rourke goal? Still confident? Because I know those people in the crowd that maybe mightn't have been.
No, you're never like it's one thing being a player, and I've only ever experienced this as a player side of it. Like, I was never more helpless. You're helpless in that situation. You set the team out. They've done a really good job, and all of a sudden you're under the caution. Joe, we got the brainwave wherever it came from. It wasn't a moment of genius from any of the management team or anything like that. It was just Emlyn was standing there in us, and we thought we needed someone to come in and calm the game down. And Muggsy came in and did that to us and managed the game for us. And you were saying they got chances. They did, Breifne. They got chances, but they were tough chances. Our team they never panicked. They never got into a situation where they fouled or they gave a free shot from the top of the D. They kept them wide. Quinner did a really good job pushing them wide, and he didn't get 2 blocks in, but he was there under the block twice. And even when we got the break, James Rooney hits a crossfield ball. We held the ball for 5 or 6 passes. Rooney hits a crossfield ball to Mulligan, and all of a sudden it's Mulligan, Casey, Ryan O'Rourke attacking them, and we go away. So yes, I'm not saying I was utterly confident. I absolutely was not. But I was very proud of the way the lads never panicked, never gave away a foul, something we've worked on. And like, the ref was keen on giving fouls to London at the time. I think we only got 1 scoreable free for the game, and London got 8-10. Didn't give him the opportunity to give that foul, and that takes composure. And I think the boys showed that with Donny, Rinn, Pearse, Shane Quinn around that area. I think the show did really well in that situation.
Yeah, I won't ask you about the refereeing performance because I don't want you to get in trouble, because I think any sane person watching the game would have had questions about maybe some of the decisions that were made. I'm not going to ask you to vocalize that, so I don't want to get any fines or any suspensions for anything you might say. But in terms of, I suppose, what's next, we looked at the game, and now we face into a Galway appearance over in Pearse Stadium. Not maybe who we might have expected, or I suppose from people from your neck of the woods would have been expecting us to be facing. People were talking about Mayo and Carrick. Galway, not altogether surprising, pipped them at the end, and we now find ourselves in a situation where we've got a daunting task to over to Pearse Stadium next Sunday afternoon. How are you feeling about it?
No, it's I think Mayo left themselves in a really tricky situation after the league final. I've been there in 2010, where you get to a league final and you don't perform and you're bet, and then you have a few doubts about yourself. And Galway really exposed that and went after it. And when Mayo started to play at the end, you could see the gaps opening up. But I think Galway did a really good job. I think Cian O'Neill has been a huge addition to them. We had Cian in 2012 with Mayo, massive addition to our squad, the professionalism he brought, and away he goes. But you mentioned the word daunting. Why would you say daunting, Breifne, if you don't mind me turning the interview on you?
Purely basically on history. I've been in Pearse Stadium when Leitrim have walked out of there beaten at halftime, and it can be daunting to the thought of going back for a lot of Leitrim supporters. There's been many days there. There's been some good days, particularly in Tuam back in the mid-90s and later on as well, I suppose, a couple of times. But it's for fans coming in, maybe not directly involved with the team. There's some unhappy memories over the years.
No, and I think that's fair, but I do think we're like this is not, we're not going into Galway saying we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do the other. But we have done really well on the road. We're really excited. We can't control what Galway do. If Galway come out and they absolutely play to the highest level, fair play to them. But all we can kind of control is what we're going to do and how we're going to play, how we're going to train leading up to that. And that's what we're doing. And like we'll go away, we'll do our normal stuff. We've had huge support from the county board, and again, they've supported us, and we'll go up and we'll do our normal routine, and we'll go get a pre-match meal. We'll see Salt Hill. We'll examine the pitch, and we'll go in and do our thing. And all we can really do as Leitrim people is go in and play our best game. That's all we can do. And if that's good enough, and our tactics, and we've done our job as a management team, and that gives us a chance. That's great. The whole daunting thing, it's excitement, I would say. The excitement for this young team to go and see how far they can go in their careers over the next 3-4 years, and what an opportunity to go and do that against a Galway team who's just after Pippin, probably the number 2 team in the league in Division 1, and we've got an opportunity to go up and kind of test ourselves against them, which is an exciting opportunity for me.
In terms of that game against Galway, obviously Keith Byrne comes back into the options for selection after his suspension. Thoughts on the suspension? On the sending off?
Can I pass on a question?
We'll refer back to the referee in discussion earlier.
No, it was frustrating. It was absolutely frustrating. But then on the other side of it, it gave other fellas opportunities. We played Donal on the edge of the square, and we got 3-7 off our full forward line over in London. So, like for Keith, it was just Joe. I felt for him. I have to say, I felt for him. I think we're the only one that didn't get away with a suspension, I think, in the last couple of weeks. And it is what it is. We'll say no more about it. But listen, these things happen. We fought as hard as we could fight to get it off. It didn't happen. And the boys went out and reacted really well to it. But for Keith, it's a championship game that he missed for nothing, really, to be honest. But that's neither here or there. That's not for me and you to prove or disprove now at this stage.
Yeah, I suppose just looking forward to the game next week. What can you tell us about selection? Anyone not available or anyone on the injured list that may or may not be involved in or how much can you tell us?
No, we Fergal, Shane, Dr. Allen, like they've done such a remarkable job. Dahi McCabe on the SNC. We're so fortunate. Like we've 36 fit players. It's still a couple of guys carrying knocks from London. Absolutely, like he's seen that game. That was a tough game. The speed that game was played at, even the London boys after the game said they've never played a game with such pace. So it was a real high octane game and I don't know if anyone hasn't been in McGovern Park in London, because we probably haven't because of COVID and everything. But what a surface! Like it's Crow Park surface. So the game was played at such a speed, like an enormous speed. So there's still a few guys carrying small knocks from there, but nothing that'll put them out of a game. But no, we've a full squad. The medical team have done such a good job. As I said, the county board have invested in the team in terms of really putting stuff behind it, and it's really paid off with the amount of fellas we've had available to us to select every weekend. It's given us huge headaches on the 15, the 26, every week so far in the National League and the Championship.
Yeah, no, you mentioned McGovern Park. It's my first time there in, I think, 10 years since the last time Leitrim were over in the Championship. Unbelievable work done in the place in the last couple of years. And really, it's a credit to the GAA community over there in London. How much time did you get to spend there after the game? Did you get a chance to kind of let the hair down at all and socialise, or was it all just back to the bus, back to...
No, a lot of the guys stayed on for a night. Had a good night. We management team and a couple of players and backroom team and county board came home. But it was one of those ones, Breifne, you're in the marquee after the game and you're disgusted you're not staying, but then you're in the airport on the way home and you're delighted you're going home. So it was one of those ones for me, but it was listen, I've some good friends over there. We'd have connections with the Charters Club over there. Obviously Michael Solan's brother Barry's over there with Arsenal. And we've connections there, and it was great to kind of see people, and it would be nice to stay, but we had made the choice to come home at that stage.
Yeah, and final question, I suppose, and it's a little bit left field, but you mentioned the under-20s and Brendan's team that he's been bringing through over the last 2 or 3 seasons or so at that level. They put up a really impressive performance against Mayo a couple of weeks ago in Carrick-on-Shannon. Ended up by a point, but probably unfair reflection of the game, really, if the truth be told, no more than the London results in terms of how the game was played. Leitrim scored a couple of late Ferrier points to kind of close that gap to a single point. But anyone impress you from that squad? I know Shane Moran's younger brother came on as a sub late in the game, and I thought he was hugely impactful in that match. But there's some other really nice players on view. Anyone from that squad, or how aware of you of the players that are coming through that might break into your own squad in the next season or two? Yeah,
but it's great to have Barry and James there. Me and James were in at the game while Mike and Barry stayed out in Annaduff just getting prepared for training. So myself and James set up the session, shot into Pork Sean, watched the first half. And like we thought we were in the game 6-2 down, you know, we were thinking like the Leitrim could but Leitrim could push on, you know. And just for anyone listening, I was saying we for Leitrim, not for Mayo there. So, but we could push on and really challenge for it. And it was kind of, I know Mayo opened up a big gap, but there was an area there where there was no surprise to us when we were here, when the guys were filling the results while the training was going on, and the guys were filling in the result that Leitrim were coming back here, because when we were in the game, we could see that there was progress being made right throughout it. And I think Brendan set up the team really well. A few people shocked that Joe McKernan was playing centre half back. Excellent performance. Really, really strong player. Has done a few sessions with us since. So what we're going to do, Breifne, over the next couple of weeks and months, and what we've done all year with Benny, is that those players training with us all throughout before the 20 started. So Benny Guckian was bringing guys in with us. So we might have 5 or 6 on a Wednesday night training with us. And then they'd go to the under-20s. And since then, on the Wednesday nights, we bring in 4 or 5 of the young fellas as well, just to get a bit of training going as well. So it's a lot of guys stood out, I think, more so than you think. You look at young Clancy at full back, Singleton beside him, you know. But my thing is for Leitrim, and sorry for over-talking it, but you can compete if you believe you can compete. And in that 20s game, and I know Brendan was really trying to get it into them, that we can go and challenge Mayo here, you know. And it wasn't until the last 10, 15 that the players really started believing it, you know. And for me, that's the key thing. That's the key thing for Sunday. That if we don't believe we can go and challenge, there's no point of us being there. To me, it's a Connacht Semi Final. We're playing a really, really strong opponent, but we have to believe the strength we have within ourselves as well. And it's about going up there, putting up your best performance, hoping Galway are slightly off, of course, and then going down the stretch and having a right cut at it, and of course improving from where we were last year against Mayo. But yeah, in the back of your mind, if the opportunity does await, why not?
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned Joe McKernan, because I thought he was probably the standout player on both sides. Over the 60 minutes or so, he scored some lovely points, and he just seemed to dominate the game from centre back, which was great. Listen, Andy, we've overstayed our welcome. Thank you so much for giving us your time to have a chat with us. The very, very best of luck against Galway, and whatever the season continues, whether that's the Connacht Final, fingers crossed, or the Tailteann Cup, whichever way we end up going from next Sunday. So the very best of luck. Thanks for making yourself available to chat to us.
Thanks, guys.
And of course, we want to wish Andy and the side the very, very best of luck in Pearse Stadium on Sunday afternoon. Of course, in terms of the county scene, we've also seen the ladies qualify for the Connacht Intermediate Final in a couple of weeks' time. More details on that on their social medias as the next couple of weeks play out. But they've had a fairly resounding success to their championship so far. Wins over Sligo and Roscommon, defeat to Clare, who of course compete in the Connacht Championship this year, as there's no other teams in Munster, but they're not eligible to take part in that competition, or at least the final of that competition. So despite topping the group, they will sit out the final, and it will be Leitrim and Roscommon, I think, in 7 or 8 days' time, over not this weekend, the weekend after. More details to be confirmed on that in due course. And of course, their championship kicks off rather soon as well at All-Ireland level after that. Now, we're going to take a look at the club scene for about 10 or 15 minutes. We're going to take a look through each of the clubs in the county and maybe how they're faring out this year. The spring leagues, of course, Aidan, they're currently in situ there. We've played 4 rounds of those competitions. You can't really read too much into it though, because we're playing them without county players. So anyone involved with the hurlers, the senior football team, or the under 20s have missed a lot of that action, and you see a very wrong side of teams. I know Fianna struggled in that competition last year. They won't struggle, and they'll struggle again this year with so many players involved at those levels, as we talked about. So you can't really read too much into that. But we do have a look at the managers across the clubs, and of course yourself involved in the club scene in Sligo this year. Not involved in the club scene at all this year yourself?
No, I'm involved under 17s now in St Mary's, and that's happy out. So lots of time for looking around myself and looking at games. I'm looking at games now, I think, more often than if I was managing a team. So
well, there's a lot
it's
to be
great.
said.
There is. Look at it. It's a busy. To be honest, Breifne, I suppose in relation to the club scene, before we start, like we're lucky that we have a normal year. We're back in after 2 horrendously difficult years for everything, obviously, but in a sporting context, nearly impossible to get anything done as regards structure in your club training. Or so at least this year with the COVID, obviously, hopefully gone, with the new structures, now clubs have a much better window of opportunity here. I know people are saying, that the spring leagues and you're without county players. Sure, that's great. That means managers are getting a chance now to blood and train everybody in their squad that has any chance of playing adult senior football for the senior, for whatever level you're at, of playing in the adult senior team in the club. You're getting a chance to see everybody. So it's great. I think most managers are very, very happy with the way they're progressing as regards, they're seeing everybody, they're getting training done, their county players have been looked after, whatever code they're in. And it means for the sake of club championship, and from my experience of Sligo in the last 3 years with St. Mary's, if I had that, I would have been delighted, because you only got players back for championship last year at the last minute, and injuries and all kinds of stuff, and not having trained together, not having played together. That this year is not going to be the case. So managers are going to get their players back, regardless how they go in the hurling or the football. You're going to have them back by July at the very, very latest. Most cases will be back long before that. So you're going to have a proper 2.5 months with all your players available to you, with no other distractions. County is gone. So you have a full window of opportunity for preparation through your leagues into your championship, which I think most managers will be delighted with, because, particularly the managers that have a lot of players in county hurling and football, and under 20 in particular, they'll be over the moon that length of time to prepare their teams. And I think for the club season, it's probably long enough. Some managers who are in new are probably trying to get things going since January, and fitness levels and that stuff is difficult in a new job. But managers who are incumbent and there for a while are probably looking at it kind of going, yeah, we can probably kick off this in February, March, give the players, and it shortens the season a little bit for club players. Because sometimes I know that club season, starting in January in the poor conditions training and going right through to maybe some clubs October. It's a long season and players. So look, I think it's all positive this year, Breifne. I think the clubs are going to get a big bounce from this new system, getting their players back, and hopefully all back fit. Every manager now has fingers crossed to everywhere that these championship games and these Tailteann Cup games don't cause any injuries and so on and so forth, and get them all back fit, and then you have a great 2.5 months preparation for championship. Sure, it's ideal for clubs.
Absolutely, and I suppose no more than yourself, it's been all change here in County Leitrim for a lot of the clubs, and we're looking at the senior championship semi-finalists last year. No less than 3 of them, including both finalists, have a new man at the helm of both sides. We might as well start with the champions, and that, of course, is Ballinamore Shauna Heslin's a new man, but not that new either. Eddie Bubuabsi, and I apologise if I butchered your name, Eddie. He's been in that team with Dom Corrigan for the last 3 years, of course, champions last year. He now takes the helm this year. He's an experienced man. He spent a decade with Westmeath as a GPA. He's now in St. Olaf's in Dublin in that same role. And he brings a lot of different types of experience to that role. A lot of people well regard him down in Ballinamore. What's your thoughts on that kind of addition to the coaching ticket in Ballinamore?
Well, Ballinamore, I suppose, put a lot of effort into winning their championship, to be fair to them. They've been knocking on the door for several years, and I think we had a couple of run-ins with them in championship back in 16, 17, around that time, and then they knocked again hard in 19, and they were beaten again, and but they kept at it. And Dominic Corrigan came in and put in 3 years, I suppose, of extensive work in the club. And in some ways, I'm glad for Leitrim football that it paid off last year for Ballinamore. It would have been an awful damn squid for Dom Corrigan if that ball had gone in the net, and Ballinamore hadn't to win their county championship. It would have been, it would have been tough to take for Ballinamore. But the fact that they've got their win now, and they're impressive in the county final, they really took control of the game when it was coughed back up to them. They took control of it, and they pushed Mohill. They really pushed them back on their feet, and deserved their win in the end. Ballinamore to repeat again, that's the big question. Obviously, there's a massive move Mohill this year. They've had two very, very successful Longford men in charge before this, as regards Pádraig and Liam. Now they've Eamon O'Hara in. It's an interesting turn of events for all of us on this side of the border in Sligo to see what Eamon is going to do and what he's going to get in Mohill this year when he goes up. Obviously, a very, very talented bunch of players. Will be very, very stung from last year. Will have an awful lot of things to prove and get sorted themselves this year. So I think we spoke to Danny Beck here on the show, I think last year, and Danny Beck would have talked about the volume of players they have in Mohill and the volume of interest and guys playing adult football and their training sessions. That's great. Now, Eamon will have to take his experiences, and try and get Mohill. Like if you're a betting man, Mohill are probably odds on to win the championship, So from Eamon O'Hara's point of view, taking a job where the team is odds on to win it's a difficult enough job to take on when you're nearly, more than Pep Guardiola or any of the top managers in the soccer. When you have the squad and you have the resources and you're expected to win, well, whereas can you go only win? So from Ballinamores' point of view, they're going to have a real challenge. Mohill are going to come back all guns blazing. And then you're looking at the rest of the teams, through the county the last couple of years, like the Carricks.
Well, let's talk about Carrick when you mention them, because they made the semi-final last year, the final the year before. They've changed the boss as well there. I know a very popular man around Carrick, pleasant to work with when we were there last year in Dennis Connaughton. They've made a new appointment this year. They've brought in a Galway influence this season. Alan Flynn, formerly of Two Stars. Again, I've spoken to Gene Bohan about him. Gene's in there, the backroom team with him. And it seems to be very positive in the early stages in terms of the vibes that are coming out of that club as well. So they have a very bright young team coming through too. Could we see them challenge for a championship this year?
I suspect they could. I wouldn't be as confident as I would have been the year before with them when they came on the big bounce first. Last year, I think they underperformed. They didn't. There was some ruffling in the camp the year before, and I think they got a bounce and then they pushed on from it. Last year, I think they were a little bit disappointed with their outcome. They didn't achieve what they thought they were capable of achieving. So this year, a new man in, again, Breifne, a young squad. They're in a good place. Carrick, to move on. They have a squad at a young age developing. I always think back to Manor Hamilton in 2008. A young team can win championships if they're energetic and full of business. They can often upset a team that's established with their energy alone. I think Carrick are probably in that position where they have a lot of good young players coming through. I don't know Alan Flynn, but we all know Gene Bohan, and if Gene Bohan is around the camp, there certainly will be a buoyancy around Carrick this year, and like you couldn't write them off. You can never write off an urban team that have their sights set on something as regards their goals and targets set, because they do have the numbers of players, they do have the volumes, and the volume of talent certainly is in Carrick. So yeah, they'll be interesting because themselves and Feen are probably the next team that you'd look at as kind of the team that are going to push up and challenge. I think Manor Hamilton are going to struggle. Martin Green has a job on his hands in Manor Hamilton to, I suppose. I know we're bouncing around teams, but you're looking at probably the.
Let's try and keep some order on it, because we'll forget one and then we'll be in trouble. Let's look at the fourth semi-finalist from last year, Paul Pryor, his second year in Leitrim Gaels. They made that breakthrough last year. They made the semi-final. They really put it up to Mohill in that semi-final. I think we were way more competitive than people expected to be, despite having that 6-point margin at the end. Will they make that breakthrough, or would another semi-final spot really kind of solidify their position at the top table in senior football in the county?
Well, I think, and obviously you're a Leitrim Gaels man yourself, but like Leitrim Gaels have come on a very steady curve. Like there's been no flash in the pan here. Leitrim Gaels, we discussed it last year when they were formed as a club and where they are now. There's been a drastic, change in their fortunes over the period of time. Leitrim Gaels have come steadily. They haven't come in a mad rush and then disappeared. They've been coming steadily through intermediate for years, really grinding out where they are now. So they've become a very solid senior outfit. I know we played them back in 2016 with Manor in the league up in Leitrim Gaels, and even their transition from where they were then 6 years ago to where they are now, they're in contention, Breifne. I don't think they're capable of winning the championship just yet. Maybe that's a very broad statement, but I think just yet it's probably too early. So I think another semi-final for them, maybe even a final. Another year of that growth and patience, I suppose, for them to keep developing. To compete with the top teams, the Mohuls and the likes, the Ballinamores, who are very established over a long period of time. Leitrim Gaels are there, but their quality is very good. But is it going to win a senior championship yet? I'm just not sure.
Yeah, the quarterfinalists from last year, we had Ohawillan beaten at that stage by St. Mary's. They'll be looked after this year. You mentioned Martin Green, their manager last year, is now with Manor this season as part of the Fermanagh takeover. I think 4 clubs with Fermanagh, originally Fermanagh-based managers, but Ohawillan, they'll be, Cathal Murphy will be over them this year. Interesting to see what they bring to the table. I'll just run through the quarterfinals last year. Gortletra, their season ended pretty poorly in the end, decimated by Mohull in the quarterfinal. They look at Paddy Dowd will be in the line for them, while Joe Finn obviously getting married in a week or two. Congratulations to Joe on that. But they've gone for an in-house manager this year. Ray Tubman will be over the Fina side this season. Another side that possibly, you touched on it earlier, but might be in thereabouts when we're talking about championship finalists or championship winners later on in the year. And then your own Manor Hamilton, Glencar Manor, Martin Green and Kevin Cassidy with him. And not the Donegal Kevin Cassidy, the Fermanagh Kevin Cassidy. They're coming in from across the border there in Fermanagh too. So all change there at the quarterfinal stage for all those sides. You might as well throw in Melvin Gales there too. James Phelan, obviously, he's gone. They survived in that relegation playoff last year. Matthew Keenan, another Fermanagh-based manager, he's coming into that side. So a lot of new faces in that middle ground in the senior championship this year.
Yeah, I suppose I can speak for Manor Hamilton to a degree. Like they've been, I suppose, at the ascendancy of championship for maybe 15 years now in Leitrim. They're probably on a little bit of a taper at the moment. Martin Green is probably in at the right time to give it a new injection of enthusiasm and so on and so forth. Funny, we're out there at my father's memorial tournament at the weekend, and you see the Manor Hamilton on the 13 side, and you see the under 15 side, and you see their 17s. They do have plenty coming, but it's a little bit away yet, and I think there's a gap there at the moment. The old stalwarts, the McDonalds and the Darren Sweeneys, and the James Clancy's are finished now, but the stalwarts are going to give it everything they can, obviously. But I think they've lost too many at this stage. They've lost too many players, to retirement and to stepping away from it. So the transition is going to be a little bit slower from Manor Hamilton back to, I think, championship. Real championship contenders. Yeah, they'll be knocking about. Nobody will want to see them in a championship game, especially in a knockout game. They have know-how, they have guile. Martin Green will bring a little bit more to them. It's interesting to see how it'll go. I think it's going okay at the minute out there. Cheltenham at the weekend, they're happy enough with how it's developing. So, again, will they be winning the more than Leitrim Gaels? I don't think they'll win the championship. I don't think they'll be, but can they be buzzing around the semi-final? Absolutely, of course they can, yeah.
The final team in the senior championship this year, Dromahair, they still hold on to their championship winning manager from last year, someone you'll know quite well from around the Centre of Excellence out there in Sligo, Pádraig Clancy. He made a big impact in Dromahair last year. They were very impressive en route to that intermediate championship. Can they make an impression in the senior championship? Can they make that step up? Do they have the players? Do they have the structures?
Well, they do. They're getting there. Like Pádraig Clancy is salt of the earth guy, and he brought that. He's a very, very likable character, and he brought that with him to Dromahair last year, and I think he got a huge response from that, from his personality alone. Never mind his football prowess. So I think Dromahair, they're not going to win a senior championship. For Dromahair to be competitive and stay in senior championship this year would be a good testament to where they're developing. Obviously, the Martin Feeney and there are lots of guys coming, but I think they are young and they're fresh. They're full of energy. Big numbers playing, so they've all the right ingredients now to try and keep building, and keep going. But like from a realistic point of view, if they got to a quarter-final of a championship or semi-final of a championship, it'd be an astounding step for them coming from intermediate last year. So I think Dromahair would be very happy to maintain their senior status in championship, possibly get to a knockout stage. would be a big achievement for them. That's been realistic for them. Are they good enough to win a senior championship? No, not yet. For all the obvious reasons of experience and depth and all that kind of stuff. But the only way you get that as experience is by playing at that level. So yeah, Dromahair's story last year was a great story. Dromahair have been pretenders a long time, and they've been coming around, and I have a lot of good friends, and I know that my brother-in-law Camillus won't be thanking me for putting them down a little bit, but they've been in the doldrums really for a long time, and they need this. And Dromahair probably are probably punching a little bit above their weight at the minute, but I think they're well capable of keeping going doing that with like Pádraig Clancy involved.
Yeah, moving down towards the intermediate grade, I suppose Ballinaglera beaten finalists last year, having only won one game in the group. They scraped in, I think, on points difference or head-to-head results effectively into the quarterfinals, but then they just went on an absolute tear. They beat through, I think they beat Kiltubber, unsurprisingly, to anyone who was outside the group in the semi-final. They've progressed. They got beaten in the end by that Dromahair side, but they've kept their manager, JPK, and he's back for another year. Can we see a bit more of less of a Jekyll and Hyde situation from them?
Hard to know. Like Ballinaglera traditionally have been awful hard to beat. From my day playing against them in my younger years of playing intermediate football against them, like it was a horrible place to go to play football, in the sense that like you never, like Frankie Reynolds and the guys at the time, they haven't changed. They're a dogged outfit, and they work. They have a real rural approach to their mindset and to how they play the game. They never say die. It's a never say die approach. It's sometimes you might meet a team that mightn't be as committed that you could get put away. You won't put Ballinaglera away, and that's what showed last year for them. Where they bounced, and they just they wouldn't let it go, and then that's kind of, and JP Kane, the consistency of management is important for the like of Ballinaglera. To stay on the same path for a while is important. I think a lot of clubs who are struggling, I'm not saying managers are struggling, but a lot of time they tend to change managers too often. They go for 1 year at a time, and it's no good really. You really need a steady progression and something that can build over a period of time. I think that's what everybody's looking for in their management structures, is trying to get guys who are willing to commit to a longer term kind of building project rather than a one-off hit. Because the one-off hit doesn't really develop much. It might get a job done sometimes, rarely, but it might. But it won't develop a long-term strategy for a club and a longevity for the club. So you're looking for Ballinaglera from JP Kempen there again. That's good. That's a good sign. When I see a manager staying for a second term, it means that things are developing, and that he's there obviously to win this year now. But there's a progression, and that's good.
Yeah, looking down through some of the other names, there's a lot of familiar faces to anyone who followed the championship last year in that grade. Joe Cox is back in Anna Duff. Neighbours, Bornacoola have Seamus Mallon with them. Drumkieran, they have Richard McTiernan back in the hot seat. Kieran McTague, Aidan Dockery, that ticket is back in Kiltubbard, while Malgukian will be over Drumreilly next year. Some of the ones that are changing, though, Aughtasheelan, they'll have Terence Reynolds over them, well known to anyone over in Carrigallen direction. I know he's a teacher over there. I think he might even be the principal over in Carrigallen Vocational School. Farrell McKeown, he's a new name also to the Allen Gales club in terms of he's replaced Martin McGowan there. So very little change really across the rest of the Intermediate Championship. Your thoughts on that? Does it benefit you being that second or third year manager into a competition like that?
It does, of course. And I think there's a clear picture developing here for a lot of clubs where they're going with their own people as managers. I think that's a very progressive thing for Leitrim football. Overall, it's fine bringing guys in from outside, no problem. That's the way the game is nowadays. You bring in expertise to do different things here and there. But I think the general trend here, there's an awful lot of Leitrim guys managing their own clubs now. And these guys, and to be fair, an awful lot of the names are so familiar because I would have played against all these fellas. So to have that volume of lads looking after their own clubs in the county is very good, because I think that's where really the growth comes from. It comes from within. That when you're that amount of level of expertise around your clubs, where you have guys good enough to do their adult managers' jobs within their own clubs. That's what every club really is trying to aspire to. If you want any club, if you ask any club, they'll try and they'll tell you that we'd love to have our own man in charge, but we don't have anybody at the minute. And I think for these clubs to have all these managers internally is brilliant. I think it's very progressive for them.
I did miss one. That's, of course, Liam Higgins. The Estlin man will be over Avas in the Intermediate Championship this year. He replaces Vincent McBrien and Vincent had some with him, his brother-in-law. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I'll get shot for that, but the two of them were on the ticket last year. So Liam Higgins comes in there as well, obviously better known maybe as an Estlin supporter. In the Intermediate the Junior Championship, of course, Mull promoted into Intermediate last year, and Carrigallen dropped down into that third tier. So Paul Marley will be over them this year, and he's joined in that grade by other first teams. Clune, Aidan Rudden from Templeport, just outside Ballyconnell in Cavan there. He will be joining him in Clune, and then Adrian McCaffrey will be over Estlin, his second year in the role there as well. And the final club that we have to mention is looking at Glenfarne, of course. Aidan McCallion takes his second season of this spell. He's had a couple of spells with the club now, well associated with Glenfarne over the last few years, but he has pulled off some nice impressive performances in the Spring League this year. Of course, nobody really from the Glenfarne side directly involved with the county side, so they've had a full deck to deal from for the last couple of weeks. But they had a nice win, a couple of nice wins in the Spring League so far. They'll be looking to build up momentum and carry it forward. And they got very close last year to that Junior Championship. They got to the final, and they'll be looking to go and win that this year. And I suppose without a second team from Mull in there, it might be a little bit more open for them.
It might be, and there's another point in that too, Breifne, after mentioning there. It's an obvious point, but it's a point that's well made, is that I know we said earlier on, and it's not a contradiction per se, like teams that are dealing with their full deck at the moment of players are making huge strides because they're months ahead of the other teams. So I know there's grades and difference between senior and junior, but Glenfarne and these teams aren't interested in that, as they don't care. What they're dealing with is they're dealing with their competition, and they're getting a lot of work done with their full panel at the moment. So that's a big plus for the teams in junior level, where they mightn't have as much involvement at intercounty level as regards, their adult players and maybe under 20s. So there's a big plus for those teams, in my opinion, with those, development leagues where they're getting full games, because most teams look at development leagues as just development leagues. And they're really kind of treading water till the rest of the panel comes back into play, and then players will drop back down grades. And this is generally what happens in these development leagues. You have guys from intermediate coming up and playing senior, and you have guys from junior up playing, and then all of a sudden, then that dynamic changes when the players come back from the county setups, and then players go back down. But for the teams in junior, they're at their grade. So they're not dropping down anywhere. So they're all at full tilt. And I think that's something that kind of gives those teams a little bit of a head start this year. So they'll all be glad to see the back of Mull. Again, go back to the discussion with Danny Beck last year. Mull have enough players probably to run five adult teams at the minute. There's so many players. So look, I think again, given the buoyancy of this year, given the restructuring of this year, Breifne, given the new managements and a lot of them internal managers, in the clubs, I think it's going to be a great year for club football. I think football needs, society needs a lift, and football, you're saying to me, they're not been involved. Not been involved is great, because it means I can go and watch games morning, noon, and night all over the place at free will, and go and it's just great, because I think there's a buoyancy around the place this year for sport. People just want to, they're mad for it, and thank God, fingers crossed, COVID has left us, and that we're now in a position to to kind of go on and have a full season. So I think a lot of clubs are going to be buoyed this year. There's going to be a lot of buoyancy around club championships, a lot of expectation. Again, I'm looking at the big ones again. We didn't discuss them much. The likes of Ahowell and the senior level, they're looking at their county players now that are performing very well for them. They just said that was their missing link for the last couple of years, the performance level of their top players. Now that them going well, they're back in the mix. There's lots of pressure on the bigger 2 or 3 teams at all grades to perform, and I think this year, with the buoyancy around, there could be an opportunity for anybody to come in and cause upsets.
Absolutely. I think you touched on it there about people wanting to get back out, and a great desire and hunger to get to games. Of course, that's going to hopefully happen all through the summer in Park Sean and far beyond as teams line up to play games. I'm not quite sure the detail. We'll bring it to your information as soon as we get it in terms of how the structure is going to work in terms of home and away games, whether it's back to neutral venues now that we have access to do that with COVID regulations being lifted. But I think people are mad to get out to games, and that starts on Sunday, of course, with that big game. Leitrim taking the trip to Pearse Stadium to take on Galway in the Connacht Senior Football Championship Semi Final. And we're all crossing everything, fingers, toes, arms, legs, the whole shebang, that we'll get a result.
And we can all stop and knock on the way as well.
we have a little pray on the way. Aidan is sitting very firmly on we're aspirational rather than expectational, but at the same time, we put all our support behind the lads and cheer them on Sunday. So hopefully we'll see you over in Pearse Stadium on Sunday, cheering on the lads. For most this week, that's been it. We'll be back every week from here to the end of the club season later in the year. Hopefully your club will be involved right up to the county final day. There's plenty of football to be played between now and then. Aidan, thanks for joining me. We'll be chatting to you through the season.
Thanks, Breifne. Very enjoyable. Thank you.